Carpenter and Jessup versus Huang, McLeod, Mullen.
Going to be starting here in the legacy seat to see what Bob Huang has concocted here. This Turbo Depths deck, getting some new tools is pretty sweet. But Harlan's deck, I think, is the one that I personally really want to see. Renin 6, one of the cards from Modern Horizons, a 2-mana Planeswalker with some fairly innocuous-looking abilities, but you know, with fetch lands, you just get to continually accrue those advantages, and it just seems really strong.
Well, you see a Renin 6 in the hand, but not in the good context. We see Huang firing off a turn 1 Duress. The hand is Brainstorm, Renin 6, Leovold, Emissary of Trest, Tarmogoyf, Snow-Covered Island, Pluto Delta, Misty Rainforest.
Yeah, this Duress here from Bob Huang is going to be to try to protect his potential combo. And he led with a Urborg, which means if he has Dark Depths plus Vampire Hexmage, he can make a 20/20 next turn. Kind of trying to check, see if the coast is clear.
And this is the kind of matchup, the Renin 6, the Wasteland, that's really the most important thing for Huang to check.
Yeah.
But these lands, the Snow-Covered Island, 2 fetch lands, doesn't really care about those. He's going to reach for the Brainstorm here.
Yeah, this hand is not particularly good against a Dark Depths style deck, so I would say if I was Harlan, you know, the Brainstorm is one of the more important cards because it can help me find my cards that do interact in a positive way.
First land for Harlan is Misty Rainforest, but Huang, quite the turn 2. There's Dark Depths. Here's Vampire Hexmage. That one resolves. 2020 looming.
Huh. Is that good?
And here it comes.
Feels pretty good. And, man, we're seeing a whole lot of shuffling today.
Harlan knows he's dead. Huang just has to attack with the 2020. Harlan will pick him up. Huang up a quick game 1 over Fear, not even 2 minutes off the clock.
I don't even know what to say. I'm pretty sure Bob did not have that Hexmage in hand when he cast the Duress. You can see the look on his face when he was just like, well, that's my deck.
Yeah.
That's why you put the cards there.
I mean, that's what the Turbo Depths deck is. You know, he has a lot of redundant copies of that style of effect. You know, the Duress can slow the game down, and then sometimes you just kill him on turn 3. Turn 2 even.
Switch to the Urza Mirror while we're... Yeah, both players here looking through their sideboard to see what they want to bring in. We're still getting that put up on the Cardboard Live extension for you.
Yeah, so for Fear's deck list, you know, we see 4 colors there. He's missing the big one against Merit Lages. Not seeing any source of Plowshares.
Yeah, no white here from Harlan's deck. He's effectively a Sultai strategy, splashing red for Renin 6. Doesn't even have like Lightning Bolt in his deck, just has Kolaghan's Command and Renin 6 as his only red spells in the main. Sideboard does have some red Elemental Blast. That card is quite strong in these fair blue slow decks. When they match up, you're just trying to find answers to Jason Mind Sculptor, Snapcaster Mage, and sometimes Brainstorm.
Let's see if there's any answers to Merit Lage. Take a look at Fear's sideboard. 3 other Elemental Blast, as you said. 3 Plague Engineer. That one's not quite good enough against Merit Lage. 2 Vendilion Click, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Force of Negation, another Force of Will, a Fatal Push, and a blue Elemental Blast.
Yeah, I don't know if Harlan really has a whole lot to bring in here because Bob Huang's deck, you know, isn't vulnerable to those red Elemental Blast or blue Elemental Blast effects. Fatal Push is probably going to come in because Harlan knows that these decks often play Dark Confidant, and that card can really get out of control if you don't have a removal spell for it. I suspect he'll probably bring in the 2 Force Negations and the 4th Force of Will. Even though they're not great against discard effects from opposing black decks, he just needs to make sure that he can stop Crop Rotation and Vampire Hexmage and hope Bob doesn't just naturally draw the combo. Vendilion Click can buy you a turn, maybe set up for a Jason Mind Sculptor bounce against the Martelage, but I'm not 100% that it's going to come in.
If you're playing a version of kind of the most popular deck of the format right now, it seems to be the metagame space that Huang is carving out. Let's see how much better he can get post-sideboard. He has an Assassin's Trophy, a Karakas, a Plague Engineer of his own, Sylvan Safekeeper, 2 Hymn to Turok, 2 Liliana the Last Hope, 3 Pithing Needle, 3 Surgical Extraction, and an Abrupt Decay, rather.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that Bob brings in Pithing Needle. You know, even though he saw that Harlan was 4 colors, Wasteland is one of the cards that allows people to easily interact with him. Most of the time, I know Jody Keith was a proponent of main decking the Pithing Needles, as well as a lot of the lists I saw just main deck Pithing Needle, but Bob Huang has gone a little away from that. And seeing all 4 colors, he might actually assume that Harlan does not have access to Wasteland in his deck. I suspect he's going to bring in cards to help him try to win the long game. I think Sylvan Safekeeper could be pretty good at protecting his permanents or his creatures from potential removal. Liliana Last Hope to rebuy their Confidant doesn't seem too bad. And he might, see some creatures from the opposing side that are pretty small. Him to Torok and Assassin's Trophy can both come in as well.
See the players in the feature match area, those fancy Karnox chairs. We got them up here in the booth as well. And you can have one of your own with 10% off at checkout if you go to karnox.com/SCG. This is the biggest improvement that we have made to coverage in some time.
Yeah, these chairs are super comfortable. They got great lumbar support. But make sure if you do go to karnox.com to get one of those chairs, make sure you do karnox.com/SCG, and that'll automatically give you 10% off when you go to checkout. Kind of think of it as an affiliate link, but if you just go to karnox.com, we don't have a code to give you. But I don't really like to sell things when I'm working, but I like to sell things that I like. These Karnox chairs are nice.
If these games keep going this fast, these players aren't making the most of their time in the chairs.
Oh, they can nap, lean back, nap it out.
And we saw Dominic Harvey, when his team won the Week 1 Open, just fully reclined.
There's something kind of magical about Dom Harvey. I don't know what it is, but he's very charismatic.
Oh, he's delightful.
Yeah.
I just would not have picked the accent out looking at him. And the first time I heard him speak, I was just like...
Is it a British accent?
His voice is magical.
Yeah. Is he the new Doctor Who? All right.
So what is Harlan's avenue to win a matchup like this?
I mean, it's pretty tough. Not having Swords of Plowshares, not having Back to Basics, not having anything really to punish these land-based decks. He's more so focused on beating combo decks with a bunch of disruption, like Inquisition of Kozilek, as well as Force of Will and some sideboard blasts and Force Negations. But, he's not really set up to interact with lands too well in Game 1 or in Game 2 after sideboard. So I think really he just needs Wasteland plus a clock. If he has an early start with a Tarmogoyf and then can kind of protect that with a Wasteland, he might be in okay shape. But these Golgari Depth deck and the lands decks as well really prey on these blue-based mid-range decks.
I mentioned earlier that there was a couple new additions to the Turbo decks, the Golgari Depths deck for Huang. He has those Nurturing Peatlands, he has a Blast Zone, but also something you don't usually see. He's registering 3 main deck copies of Wasteland this weekend. You usually see like a Ghost Quarter in these decks, but he's kind of making the statement that the mana in Legacy is so shaky that this deck that tries to Pithing Needle like Wasteland in a number of matchups can take advantage of that card.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting insight there.
Little update on the Modern seat here. Brad Carpenter wins the first game in this Urza Pseudo Mirror. Standard match still playing, though. Not even 10 minutes in the round yet.
Yeah, these players here just making sure they get their sideboard configurations correct. They have plenty of time on the clock. I know in recent years there was a change to how much time you could utilize during sideboarding.
Yeah, there used to be like a hard 3-minute cap
right.
for presenting, sideboarding, shuffling. I think now the wording is more lax. Yeah, part of the problem is when you make a hard rule, let's say I let you shuffle your deck for 1 minute at a time. That's actually very exploitable in terms of delaying the match. You're going to use the full minute every time if I give you a full minute.
Right.
But if I say it's reasonable and you're being unreasonable, there's your penalty.
Yeah, I like the more the gray area where it just is a case-by-case basis. Like you said, if you have 30 seconds to shuffle, that just gives players the ability to spend all 30 seconds every time and get no penalty.
Mm-hmm.
But here, both players, there's a ton of time on the clock. This matchup is going to be pretty lopsided one way or another.
I would say that this match has been moving at a reasonable pace. I'm not concerned about them finishing.
Well, now they're going to get a draw. You know that, right? Because you said that. We're just going to have a super long drawn-out Game 2 where Harlan barely wins, and they're going to go to Game 3 with like 6 minutes on the clock.
Going to check in halfway just with Huang with the combo on the table. Fear just leaving up Wastelands. Neither player can do anything.
All right, looks like both players are going to keep 7 here.
Prismatic Vista Looks like where Fear is starting, fetching the 19. Maybe he has a turn 1 Arkham's Astrolabe.
Maybe. Might also just fetch up a snow-covered swamp and cast a Inquisition of Kozilek or Thoughtseize or something.
Snow-covered Island is the start. A lot of Arkham's Astrolabe in the feature match this round. There's the turn 1 play for Fear. Astrolabe, draw a card.
Is there 12? I guess there's just 12.
Yeah, I know I got 4 for McLeod over here. I assume Carpenter has 4.
Yeah, it's one of the better cards in this deck. Yeah, he's got 4.
Urborg Pithing Needle for Huang. We'll get confirmation on the name there. I assume Wasteland.
I think Wasteland's a good bet.
It's a backup needle in the hand, too. Wasteland was the name. We'll see what Fear can do about it. He'll start his turn with a Ponder. I saw a Leovold and a Surgical Extraction.
Yeah, Surgical is not a huge deal for Bob. It requires basically a breaking up of the combo and then a Surgical to make sure the combo cannot be assembled again. But with Pithing Needle and Wasteland, Surgical Extraction doesn't do much of anything, honestly.
I believe the third card among those 3 is Inquisition of Kozilek, and that's really the incentive to keep here. That is the card he draws. Uses the Astrolabe off of a tropical island to Inquisition. Take a look at the hand. We have Bayou, Thespian Stage, Leon the Last Hope, Sylvan Scrying, a second Pithing Needle, and a Verdant Catacombs.
Okay.
All right, so this hand is Shy the Dark Depths the combo.
Well, he does have the Sylvan Scrying to go get it, and he has the Thespian Stage in hand, so he can go turn 2, Sylvan Scrying, turn 3, do something like the Liliana Last Up, and then turn 4 make a 2020. But Harlan here, without many answers to said Merit Lage, is going to go ahead and take that Sylvan Scrying, so that's not a potential turn 4 play.
Yeah, the Scrying to take the Thespian Stage. Can't grab that one with the Inquisition, so that decision kind of forced. Though possible that Liliana the Last Hope could be a big factor in this game.
Yeah, if Harlan doesn't have a way to pressure it, it can just maybe take up an ultimate at some point.
There's the Thespian Stage as the land for turn for Huang. We know about that Liliana. He can't cast that just yet. The other spell that we saw was a Pithing Needle. Thinking about whether he wants to just deploy that now.
You may think, oh, he can Pithing Needle the Astrolabe and shut him off of different colors of mana. You'd be wrong. Pithing Needle specifically says does not affect mana abilities. So in that case, if you're Bob, what do you name? Do you just say Wasteland again in case of an Abrupt Decay or something like that? Or do you just play nothing? Bob has opted to play nothing.
Yeah, it's kind of like Wasteland again, Renin 6, just name some fetch land in the dark. Not a very exciting line. He just passes the turn.
Naming Jason Mind Sculptor might be okay.
Here's a second Astrolabe for Fear, and he'll cast Brainstorm.
Yeah, it looks like he's a little light on mana, actually, and he missed.
3 spells.
But let's see if he has a Scalding Tarn or something like that to shuffle these away. If not, he's just going to be stuck on 2.
Well, there's something a lot less pretty to shuffle. He could Surgical Extraction one of his own cards.
I like that. You don't have to strip it out of your deck, but you're more than welcome to if you want. Surgical Extracting something like the Island or Prismatic Vista could make sure that he gets to unlock the top 2.
It's like I was thinking about putting that Leovold back and a Surgical Extraction. Maintaining some Force of Wills and a Jace in the hand.
All right. Bob here going to go ahead and...
There's Dark Depths.
And with Urborg, he's able to tap it for mana. So that's black from the Dark Depths, black from the Urborg, and then 2 tap the Thespian Stage and make a 20/20. You can go and do that right now.
Fear makes sure to get those Dark Depths counter. That's 10 counters, all right? Don't you try to set the wrong number there. Though I don't anticipate Bob thawing the Merit Lage.
No, I think this is just a case of what do I play around? And I think with Pithing Needle already on the battlefield on Wasteland, the only thing that you're really getting punished by here is Wasteland plus a way to kill the Pithing Needle. And since Harlan didn't play a land drop last turn, I cannot imagine that Bob wants to play around Wasteland, so he's probably just going to play around like a Liliana of the Veil or something.
All right, well, here's that shuffle from Fear. He knows he's in trouble. He's going to cast Surgical Extraction, targeting a card in his own graveyard just to shuffle away those 2 he put back. So he'll go to 17 and get a fresh draw step.
Yeah, really heads-up play here from Harlan, resetting the top of his deck. If he didn't do that, he was just going to be dead because the Brainstorm locked him. But Bob also just kind of comboing here without playing a spell means that the Force Wolves in Harlan's hand are basically just dead.
Fear picks up a Ponder. He'll cast that. See Polluted Delta, Inquisition, and a Bayou. He's been missing that land drop, so there's some argument to keep anything with Polluted Delta. He does. He'll play that as his land for turn.
And this is just a straight-up bluff from Harlan. He was threatening Assassin's Trophy there, but it wasn't enough, and Bob Huang goes for it. Makes that Marillage and takes down the match here against Harlan Fear's 4-color control.
Yeah, so Huang, he really doesn't have anything you can do other than shove. You can cast the Liliana, but you may as well force some action for Fear. Fear doesn't have it, and pretty quick one. Bob Huang, 2-0, wins in the Legacy seat here. We have an update. Collins Mullen won game number 1 over Dan Jessup in the Standard seat. So split on first games in Modern and Standard.
Yeah, I really want to see these Urza decks go off. Urza, Lord High Artificer, is just such a powerful card. And it might not be a lot of interesting gameplay back and forth, but the 2 decks are just insanely powerful.
Got a little Ensnaring Bridge mirror going on. Looks like Carpenter on the table in this game 2 underway. He has Urza, Lord High Artificer. It's got that Construct, an Astrolabe, and a Mind Stone, as well as a Mox Opal and 3 lands. McLeod's going to hold off some the aggression here. Ensnaring Bridge, and he uses Pithing Needle to name Urza, Lord High Artificer. Also has a Mistress Bauble and an Astrolabe.
Now that just shuts down, if I'm not mistaken, the spend 5 mana, flip the top card of your deck. So I believe that both players can still activate Urza for mana.
Yeah, it shuts off the, what's that card called? Temporal Aperture ability.
Yeah, Temporal Aperture, one of my all-time favorite cards in Infinite Mana Mental Magic.
Yeah, you see the mana ability used with Urza. That Construct is going to sacrifice the Mind Stone. McLeod looked at the card with Mistress Bauble in response. Now Carpenter deploys a Sword of the Meek.
Sword of the Meek not really threatening on its own merit, but...
What about equipped to Urza and an attack for 2?
Just as Richard Garfield intended.
So McLeod at 15, Carpenter at 18. Mistress Bauble will draw a card in McLeod's upkeep, and then he will draw for turn. Polluted Delta, he'll sacrifice that to 16.
Now it looks like earlier in the game, McLeod actually had the Wear Tear for the Thopter Foundry, or else Carpenter here would be going bananas with that Urza Sword of the Meek Thopter Foundry combo. In case you're unaware, those 3 cards on the battlefield together make infinite 1/1s, gain infinite life. Pretty good.
Snow-covered island, the find for McLeod. He has an Urza of his own in hand. Shaping up to be kind of a weird game.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's an Urza from McLeod too, but I believe that since Carpenter has half of the, or 2/3 of the combo already assembled, there's a good chance that if he goes first, he might actually just
Ooh, it is a nice follow-up to the Urza. There's that one of Mystic Forge. Carpenter's going to give that a read. Hey, it's good for us to pull this up on screen, too. You mentioned when we were talking about before the match, very similar to Experimental Frenzy. You can look at the top card. You can play it if it's a colorless spell. You can also pay 1 life and tap the Forge to exile the top card of your library.
Yeah, so it can reset itself, which is nice. Mystic Forge is a pretty cool card and one that I think could be absolutely busted in older formats.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty cool Mystic Forge lists already. Pretty exciting to have just colorless card advantage like that. Looks like Carpenter's picked up a second Mox Opal, cast that Legend Rules himself. And here's Fatal Push because that triggered Revolt gets rid of the Urza. McLeod floats a blue in response with the Mystic Forge.
Might as well.
Here's an attack for 2 with Carpenter's Urza, McLeod to 14.
Just want to say that was a really heads-up play from Carpenter. That second copy of Mox Opal actually gave him the Revolt for the fatal push that actually took down the Urza Lord High Artificer. And now Goblin Engineer going to go get something cool from Carpenter side of things and put it into the graveyard.
And he already has that Thopter Foundry in the graveyard and that Sword of the Meek on the table. See if he wants some kind of third element. Pithing Needle is going to go to the graveyard. And Goblin Engineer, you can pay a red, tap it, sacrifice an artifact, return an artifact with mana cost 3 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield.
Yep, so what he can do is sacrifice something like the Sword of the Meek, get back the Pithing Needle, name Pithing Needle on one of McLeod's cards. In a pinch, he could just name Thopter Foundry if Lee actually gets that kind of a symbol this turn, next turn or two.
So McLeod's going to draw for turn. This was a card he knew about because of the Mystic Forge. Now he's consulting the top of the library. And we'll see how much damage he can do with the Forge. The potential ceiling of this card seems very high.
I agree. You need a mana generator, though, to make it really busted. And that's why Urza is so powerful alongside it.
And especially with 0 mana artifacts like Mishra's Bauble.
Looks like he picked up a Thopter Foundry. He's going to deploy that. Maybe. He has 2 copies of War Invention in hand as well. He may want to not cast the Thopter Foundry here and just Whir. So he's using basically too much blue mana to be able to do both.
He's given some pause here. He's untapped the lands. Not committed to that Foundry line.
All right, Whir for 1. Not only is that going to let him tutor for a 1-mana artifact, but it also resets the top of his deck.
Yeah, and that matters with the Mystic Forge.
Yeah. Notably, you can't play lands off of the Mystic Forge, it's only colorless spells. So it's not quite Experimental Frenzy, but it's pretty cool nonetheless, and you can search for it via War of Invention as well. It's really good in matchups where your opponent has a bunch of disenchants and things that blow up permanents like Assassin's Trophy.
Find off of the Whir is Nihil's Spellbomb. That does a reasonable job at checking the Goblin Engineer for now.
McLeod might want to go ahead and exile the graveyard. Otherwise, he's going to be a little light on black mana over the next few turns, not able to deploy the Thopter Foundry. Let's just pass and see if Carpenter wants to try to activate the Goblin Engineer at any point.
Carpenter will draw for turn. Like Teferi Time Raveler is going to be the cast here. Not a ton of instant speed play in this matchup.
No, but it does make sure that War of Invention can't be cast at instant speed. And so Brad doesn't really have to play around anything once it's on the battlefield.
Teammate Harlan Fear consulting with Carpenter here.
It also can bounce artifacts, which is nice.
Yeah, likely they're looking at what they want to use that -3 ability on.
It can bounce a Snaring Bridge and just start attacking, but not sure how good that's going to be. The draw card off of it is something I'm looking forward to right now, but can also maybe target the Nile Spellbomb, force a pop, and then in response, Engineer can bring back Thopter Foundry and then gain infinite life. Okay, yeah, no, that's way better. Yeah, let's target the Nile Spellbomb. In response, McLeod's going to pop it because otherwise going back to his hand. And then Goblin Engineer brings back Thopter Foundry. Urza lets him gain infinite life, infinite mana, put a million permanents on the battlefield.
Yep, that ability, the mana ability, still works through that needle. So here you see Teferi on the Spellbomb. McLeod can sacrifice it or not, kind of be the same outcome either way. He's going to use it.
Yeah, and this is kind of why I was saying you might want to main phase it, because now this is the worst case scenario for not using the Nile Spellbomb on main phase.
Got to use that Astrolabe to draw the card off the Spellbomb, but spells from hand are not useful against that Teferi. So you see now Carpenter responds with that Goblin Engineer. Sacrifice Arkham's Astrolabe. Get back that Thopter Foundry.
And this is the strength of Goblin Engineer in this deck. You know, McLeod was able to deal with it early on, but now it just comes back. Engineer can tutor up for a missing piece if necessary. And now, you know, Carpenter can just at any point make infinite 1/1s, gain infinite life. Unfortunately, you can't play his entire deck thanks to the Pithing Needle on Urza, but the mana ability, of course, does still work.
Yeah, probably doing all right as it stands. So as you mentioned, this is a little infinite combo we have going on. Thopter Foundry lets you sacrifice an artifact, make a 1/1 Thopter, gain a life. Sword of the Meek, if it's in your graveyard, it comes back when a 1/1 enters the battlefield under your control and equips to it. So you keep sacrificing the sword. That makes a new Thopter. Then the sword comes back attached to that Thopter. Urza lets you just tap those artifacts in between, so you have a never-ending supply of mana to keep doing it.
Yeah, it's a 3-card combo, but it's one that's very easy to find thanks to War of Invention and a number of other things. Get our good boy Nick Miller on the beat. And of course, it says 18, but it's really 18 bajillion. But the game is not over yet because Lee McLeod has the exact same combo in his deck, and he can deploy just as many to block as Brad can make to attack.
And that is one thing about this combo, too. The individual pieces, they're a little bit mana intensive, but think about it. That's the strength of Urza Lord High Artificer. If you already have a bunch of artifacts, you make a bunch of mana, your Astrolabes clean that up, so colored mana requirements are not difficult.
Now, also hilariously enough, McLeod can just empty his hand. If he can empty his hand all the way, that'll allow him to use the Ensnaring Bridge to kind of lock down Carpenter for at least one attack phase.
Carpenter has that Teferi Time Raveler hanging out on a 1. Over time, that does become an answer to the Ensnaring Bridge, assuming McLeod doesn't combo back. You get that back up to 3 or 4, use Teferi to bounce the bridge.
Yeah, it might take a couple of turns, but as long as McLeod doesn't assemble an infinite combo himself, this should be good enough at some point. Now, he has the Mystic Forge. He has Thopter Foundry in hand, Ichor Wellspring in hand. I don't know if he has enough mana to deploy all the cards from his hand.
Draw for turn is Urza. He'll cast that, gets a construct.
Yeah, he was trying to see if he wanted to War of Invention before draw step, but decides Urza is an important piece of this combo, so he's going to stick Urza, get the construct.
Still has that Thopter Foundry in hand.
Yep, uses the...
and Sword of the Meek off the top with the Mystic Forge.
And the Astrolabe plus any other artifact allows him to actually generate the black mana required to cast the Thopter Foundry, and it looks like we have 2 infinite combos battling against each other. That is crazy.
Infinite life, infinite Thopters on both sides of the table. How do you break open a mirror like that?
Well, at some point, one player is going to have to disenchant or something, and then the other player is just going to say, okay, however many creatures you have, I'm going to make twice that many. You know, you have to, at some point you have to say, I stop after X number of activations, but, you know, in mid-combat, you can just make however many more you need to be completely defensive.
You're talking about ways to break up the combo. Mentioned earlier, there's already 1 Wear Terror in McLeod's graveyard. He does have a second copy in the sideboard. Presumably both copies are in. Teferi Time Raveler in the sideboard as well, so that -3 could break up the combo. That one, maybe you have to do it at a different timing. I'm not sure. You got to be able to make the Thopters and attack for more than there are blockers. Here's an Ichor Wellspring. And with that Mystic Forge, that seems like that's going to be a big factor in McLeod's ability to get to that disenchant effect first.
Yeah, Mystic Forge is going to let him kind of churn through his deck, but War of Invention here. Now he can actually, after he's made a bunch, he can maybe Pithing Needle, but no, because then...
It finds him. Ooh!
Or you just win the game on the spot.
Puripur Ether Grid. So that's a way to answer the Urza. You can take that one down, then you're the only one with Urza, you're the only one with the infinite combo.
Or you just kill your... Oh, yeah.
You have to stop the infinite life stream first.
Kill Urza first, and then kill your opponent.
Yeah, and both players know it, so this one is now all tied up. Modern match going to game 3.
Now we're going to be moving on over to standard here so we can see if Collins Mullen's able to take down this match here while these other two players are sideboarding.
So this is Bant Ramp versus Orzhov Vampires. This is game number 2. Mullen's up a game over Jessup, already in progress. See a Llanowar Elf and a Baffling End that took care of an Adanto Vanguard.
Yeah, Baffling End, a strong card here from the Bant Ramp decks, is just answering any of the mana creatures from the opponent and also being a great answer to a lot of the early threats from these aggressive strategies.
Jessup plays third land. It's a Plains. Already has 2 black-white lands on the battlefield. See if he can get something on the table. That Baffling End on the Vanguard was the only pressure that he had.
It looks like he has a Sorin Imperious Bloodlord in hand. I'm curious if he has the Champion of Dusk as well.
Looks like Jessup suffering from some mulligans here. Pretty light on cards in hand.
True.
Sorin, -3. There is that Champion of Dust, so he'll draw 1 card and lose 1 life. He'll go to 18.
All right, all right. Got some traction going. Made a 4/4, put a Planeswalker on the battlefield. And if Mullen doesn't have a way to get this Champion of Dust off the battlefield, that Sorin is going to keep ticking up and maybe start throwing vampires at his creatures, his mana accelerators.
Forest is the land for Mullen. He'll cast a second Llanowar Elves.
No blue mana, though, so Gross Pile kind of rotting in his hand. Mullen's here looking to get up to 6 total mana so he can make a 4/5 Hydra that fights the Champion of Dusk. But I'm assuming Carpenter here is just going to plus the Sorin Vengeful Bloodlord to put a counter on it, so that the hope might be dashed there for Collins.
So just past his turn after that Elf. So now we see Jessup play land number 4, another Plains. Sorin goes up to 2, grows the Champion of Dusk up to a 5/5.
Gideon Blackblade was the draw, and now we can actually plus it to give the Champion of Dusk Vigilance, swing in, gain life, and provide a blocker here to protect the Sorin.
Yeah, pretty good swings for Jessup. He'll go up to 23, Mullen down to 15. That Voracious Hydra in Mullen's hand can't make that quite big enough here.
No, I'm not even sure he has a land drop to play either, so might only be able to do it for 3.
And he is hurting for that lack of blue mana. We see Growth Spiral, Hydroid Krasis in hand.
I believe I also saw a Time Wipe.
Yikes.
Yeah, but do have a play here for 5 mana. Looks like it is going to be a Vicious Hydra.
So X equals 3. He can't use the fight mode here. It's too small, but he will double the number of counters. So now he has a 6/7 trample.
I mean, that's a pretty good rate for 5 mana. A 6/7 trampler for 5 mana is something that I would have been giddy about in my youthful days.
I used to think Ivy Elemental was just a good card.
Yeah, it's so big. Green X for an XX? Are you kidding?
Right. But Voracious Hydra puts that one to shame. There it is from Odyssey.
I think if that got reprinted today, it would be a common.
Yeah, you would put it in your draft deck, and that's about it.
Remember, was it, I want to say Scion of Gaia? Or Scion of the Wild? Scion of the Wild. A 3-mana star power and toughness equal to the number of creatures you control. Started off as a rare in Ravnica block. Ended up as a common in one of the Modern Master sets.
There it is.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
Not even particularly good common.
Yeah. So it looks like Gideon is ticked up here on Champion of Dusk, probably giving it, I guess indestructible now?
It's attacking into a big creature. You see the Sorin gives it Death Touch and Lifelink. Gideon's going to make it swing in, presumably with indestructible. So Jessup will go to 29, Mullen down to 9. And a Adanto Vanguard deployed. A lot of life to make that indestructible.
Yeah, making it indestructible is pretty good, but it doesn't really chump block the Vicious Hydra very well.
Yeah, Voracious Hydra does have trample.
Voracious Hydra, excuse me. The trample on it is something that I've seen multiple people forget already, and it's just it's such a unique card. You know, we've seen Hydras in the past get a lot of playtime, most notably in recent memory, Hydroid Krasis, but this Voracious Hydra just every time I see a cast, it just looks nice. I mean, 5 mana to make a 6/7 trampler, that's great.
So Mullen picked up a live draw step. Not clear if it's too little too late, but he picked up a Nissa who shakes the world, and he does have the mana to cast that one. See if that's where he goes for turn.
Could help him potentially clear out both Planeswalkers, or at least try to pressure both Planeswalkers.
Between the Sorin and the Gideon, which one are you more incentivized to get off the table?
Well, I think you can shrink the Gideon significantly by just attacking it for 6. I would go the land from Nissa at the Sorin and the Voracious Hydra at the Gideon. But you are at 9. And so if you can't kill the Gideon, you might just die on the Crackback if Jessup has a removal spell for your land. But you're also just kind of chump blocking if you don't.
All right, so here is that Nissa for Mullen, which means he does have to tap the 2 Llanowar Elves.
Yeah, but the 3/3 that Nissa creates does have Vigilance, so he can both attack and block with it.
So untaps one of those forests. It's a 3/3 now. And next turn, if that Sorin's still around, it pumps the champion to be larger than the Hydra on its own. Currently a 6/6 versus a 6/7.
Colin's going to attack both at the Gideon to finish it off. That'll eliminate effectively a 4/4 from the battlefield. I do think he needs to do some amount of damage to the Gideon, otherwise the -6 can clear out the Hydra, and then all the creatures are basically free to start attacking.
So he's looking at an attack with both, making his mind up on where he wants him to go. Certainly not attacking Jessup himself, I can tell you that much.
Yeah, these Planeswalkers really make for some difficult decisions as far as attacking is concerned for Mullins.
Teammate Lee McLeod offering some insights here. It's a tough spot. Remember, he has a hand of 3 blue cards, none of which he can cast. So there's a split on attacks. So the Forest is coming at Gideon, the Hydra's coming at Sorin.
Okay, so a block and a pay 4 life here is going to effectively save the Gideon from taking any damage. So he gets to keep a 4/4 on the battlefield. The Voracious Hydra eats the Sorin Vengeful Bloodlord. But now with only 1 blocker at his disposal, Colin might actually lose this game.
So Jessup fell to 25. We'll go to his turn.
Looks like Jessup has a backup Gideon in hand. May want to go ahead and -6 the Blackblade, take care of one of the creatures from the opposing side or the Planeswalker. Shove in with the rest of the creatures, putting a lot of pressure on Colin's life total. I believe he also has a champion, or is it the 1-drop, Knight of Ebon Legion.
So here's an awkward thing. You know, a removal spell on the Forest would be lethal, but Gideon Blackblade, the -6, only non-land permanent, so he just has to attack with his creatures here.
Right.
Forest jumps in front of the big one, but we still have 7 coming across, and that's going to go at the Nissa. Nissa now down.
Yes, very big heads-up play from Dan Jessup here, attacking first because you don't need to tick up on the Gideon or anything before combat. Shoves in with all his creatures, forces a chump block from Mullins, gets rid of the Nissa permanently, and even has a 1-drop to pair with it.
Yeah, so Mullen fell to 2 there. The Gideon exiled the Nissa. Backup Gideon and Knight of the Ebon Legion show up. Mullen lost 4 more life, so that's a 2/3 now.
Yeah, things are just not really working out here for Collins, but he is up a game, so even if he loses this game, there might be a game 3 on the way. Just depends on how the Lee McLeod and Brad Carpenter matchup shakes up.
See Mullen draw for turn, now facing down 4 lethal attackers.
I believe the only spell in his hand he can cast is an Incubation Druid or a Hydra. They're going to go ahead and go to game 3.
And Mullen packs him up, so we have 1 match recorded here. Bob Huang did win the Legacy match over Harlan Fear. 1-1 in Standard and Modern right now. So we're going to go back to the Modern game. We did have them pause, so we should be starting out game number 3 here, the decider for the Modern seat.
Yeah, I think this is just going to be a pure race to see who can combo first. We saw a lot of back and forth in game one. Both players assembled an infinite combo, but McLeod was able to assemble 2 infinite combos thanks to Urza Lord High Artificer.
Carpenter starts with Mishra's Bobble, targets himself, plays Blood Crypt tapped. On McLeod's upkeep, he'll draw for the Bobble.
Yeah, heads up play there for Brad. With a fetch land in hand, you can look at the top card of your deck before you pop the Bobble. And if you look and see a card you want to keep, you play the land tapped. If you don't want to keep it, you shuffle it away with Scalding Tarn.
McLeod plays a Watery Grave tap. We'll go back to Carpenter, Snow-Covered Island into Goblin Engineer.
Yeah, I'm curious what he's going to go get. May want to just go get Astrolabe so you can keep bouncing them back and forth out of the graveyard and drawing cards while doing so.
So you have an Iker Wellspring in the deck?
Yep, Iker Wellspring gets you 1 coming in and 1 going out, which is nice.
It looks like Sword of the Meek was a selection.
So
Trying to get that combo online.
Yep.
McLeod, Flooded Strand will be his second land. He'll fetch to 19. This is kind of the big difference between the two builds here, as Carpenter has that red mana for the Engineer, whereas McLeod's an Esper deck.
Yeah, just playing it way more like those old War Prison decks that we've been used to seeing until the addition of Urza Lord High Artificer and Goblin Engineer were printed in Modern Horizons.
McLeod finds Snow-Covered Island. We'll see what he has on turn number 2.
A couple 1-mana artifacts going to be coming down here probably.
It's like Pithing Needle. Nice answer to the Engineer. Well, do you go for the Engineer or do you go for the Thopter Foundry, rather? We'll find out what the name was. Chromatic Star is the other play for turn. We go to Carpenter. He'll crack Polluted Delta. Goes to 19. Finds a Hallowed Fountain on tap, so he'll shock down to 17. And Thopter Foundry was the name for McLeod's Pithing Needle.
So probably named that just simply because searching up the Sword of the Meek was a little fishy.
Goblin Engineer attacks, McLeod to 18. And here's Psy Master Thopterus plus Mishra's Bobble, so we'll get a Nick Miller Thopter on the table for Carpenter. And that's going to bring back Sword of the Meek. Nice little interaction there.
That's a nice little interaction for sure. And with Goblin Engineer now, Carpenter can actually just keep sacrificing the Sword of the Meek, bringing back Mishra's Bobble. And, just has a lot of food to work with, basically, to do all sorts of cool stuff. Psy Master Thopterus can start drawing some cards as well. But I think in this matchup, it's more about speed than anything else. And if McLeod's able to assemble Urza plus Thopter Sword or whatever and can't get rid of his own Pithing Needle, he can go infinite before Carpenter can, maybe.
Yeah, infinite combos have a way of invalidating chip damage in the early game. And it looks like on turn 3, McLeod is a Psy of his own coming off a fetch land. See if he has something to make a Thopter. All right, Carpenter's going to look at the deck with Mishra's Bobble. We'll go back his way. So there was no Thopter just yet for McLeod. Carpenter will draw for Bobble and then draw for turn.
All right, looks like he does have Urza, so he can go ahead and cast that, get onto the battlefield, and generate a bunch of mana. But it doesn't look like he has too much to do with said mana. Can maybe start sacrificing Sword of the Meek and a Thopter to draw cards, kind of that self-sustaining cycle effect.
2 draws for turn where it's a couple shock lands. It's going to come in at attack. That 1/4 blocker just checks one of those creatures on the ground, but 3 points come across. McLeod to 14. Carpenter will shock to 15 for a Steam Vents. Tap before. Urza Lord Artificer. Get that Construct token and passes the turn.
So now if he so chooses, he can tap Matthias Hunt token and Sword of the Meek to sacrifice the Sword of the Meek and Nick Miller token, drawing a card. And then any artifact will allow him to generate a 1/1 and bring back the Sword of the Meek. So it's not quite infinite. You need to hit like a string of cheap artifacts off the top. But that is one way to draw a significant number of cards.
And the deck is pretty flush with cheap artifacts.
For sure.
Right, McLeod with an Urza of his own. Dueling Urzas.
Dueling side, dueling Urza.
So here's an activation of that Chromatic Star. McLeod will draw a card. Fatal Push on your Urza. Revolts triggered by that star.
Yeah, that was quite strong here for McLeod. And this might be the boost he needs to steal this game.
Carpenter floats 2 blue mana. He's going to use that to sacrifice the Sword of the Meek to draw a card with the Sai.
Well, now I found a Word of Invention, so things could get hairy here. An attack for 1. That's bold.
Carpenter to 14 off that attack. We'll see what he can do to salvage his position.
So Word of Invention here, he could do it for X equals 2. Go get Ichor Wellspring. He could try to leave open a red mana on top of that and then use Goblin Engineer plus Wellspring to draw a couple cards and bring back a Bauble. Cycle the Bauble to draw a card on the next turn. And then hope he doesn't die from Lee McLeod's side.
Snow-covered Swamp is the land for turn. Taps 4 lands. No Convoke, so it's a Word of Invention for 1. Improvise, rather.
Oh, yeah, I kept saying Convoke. That's probably my fault.
Pithy Needle found, names Urza Lord Artificer. So now we have a Needle on Urza and a Needle on Thopter Foundry.
Pithy Needle is always really strange in mirror matches because it usually just devolves into, do I have the answer for a very specific thing or not? And if I don't, I can Pithy Needle make sure that your side doesn't use it to kill me.
Right. All right, we'll see if McLeod can pull further ahead. We go to his turn. I believe he drew Ensnaring Bridge, or I want to say that's one of the cards in hand. That one's not exciting to try to apply pressure. Polluted Delta is the land for turn.
Neither player is very close to anything resembling an infinite combo.
Now, notably, if McLeod finds the combo, he can use his Sai to sacrifice his Pithing Needle and then start going off with Thopter Foundry.
Right.
Carpenter can't do that.
Sai is a really, really cool part of this deck. Gives you a mana sink for Urza to just cycle a bunch of those artifacts and draw cards. You know, it's an alternate win condition if your opponent has a bunch of hate for your various spells, various artifacts.
McLeod to 13 off the fetch. Looks like a tapped Steam Vents. Ensnaring Bridge will be cast. Sai will make a Thopter token. Looks like Teferi Time Raveler is one of the 2 cards left over in McLeod's clan. And he'll pass turn.
Unfortunately for him, he doesn't have a Hallowed Fountain in the deck. Just has the 1 Steam Vents, 1 Watery Grave because he's base Grixis. And he has 1 snow-covered plains he can fetch up with Flutterstrand or, or some of those 1 mana artifacts that give him access to any color of mana.
A little desperation from Carpenter. He's going to use the Engineer, sacrificing that Construct token, gets back Mishra's Bauble, looks at the top card of McLeod's deck on the end step, so he'll draw for Bauble and then draw for turn.
Well, unfortunately for Brad, the Ensnaring Bridge means that the creatures don't really matter that much anymore. So he's going to be looking to assemble Thopter Sword, Urza, as well as some way to deal with the opposing Pithing Needle. Doesn't really have a whole lot going on otherwise.
Looks like he drew land and Thopter Foundry. Foundry's still needled.
Yeah, but he can go ahead and cast it, get it on the battlefield.
Yeah, you can weld it around, I suppose.
Yep. Now, we were talking a bit about Ichor Wellspring as a one-of in these decks. Brad Carpenter actually does not have access to one currently. So he didn't have that option available to him with that War of Invention, but it is something to keep an eye on if you want to play the style of deck. The One of Vicar Wellspring combined with Goblin Engineer lets you do some pretty dirty things.
Yeah, anytime you want to grind, getting that card on the way in and the way out can be a difference maker. You draw twice as many cards as that Mishra's Bobble anyway.
Yeah, for sure. So now if he wants, Carpenter can sacrifice Sword of the Meek and the Thopter and draw a card. If he finds another cheap artifact, he can go ahead and get both those back as well.
Plays Scalding Tarn as the land for turn. Yes, you mentioned he got Thopter when he cast that Thopter Foundry. He's looking at sacrificing Foundry plus Sword of the Meek. That'll draw him a card. Now if he makes another artifact, it'll create a Thopter and bring the Sword of the Meek back, so that makes sense. I believe Gear per Ether Grid the draw for that Psi activation. Doesn't really have many resources to capitalize on that one. Carpenter will pass turn. Instead, McLeod's going to use 2 tokens to make mana, sacrifice them both to the side to draw a card. He's looking to close the door here.
Looks like he found Gear per Ether Grid as well. I'm curious to see how he's able to close this out without that infinite combo. But Gear per Ether Grid can do a lot of damage in a very short period of time.
So he'll cast Arkham's Astrolabe. That makes a Thopter's token off the Psi. He'll draw off the Astrolabe.
Found Sword of the Meek. If I'm not mistaken, he already has Thopter Foundry in hand.
And Ventress Fair's land for turn. Here's Teferi Time Raveler.
Now this might be just to make sure that the coast is clear, because Brad can't really respond too much once this hits the battlefield. Only with activated abilities, no longer with instants or sorceries.
Suddenly you don't have to care at all about things like Ravenous Trap or Surgical Extraction.
I guess he doesn't have the Thopter Foundry. Just has the Sword of the Meek and a Gear per Ether Grid in hand.
Cast Sword of the Meek, makes a Thopter from the Psi. Still has a decent chunk of mana because of that Urza.
Yeah, but it's all blue. Can't cast the Gear per Ether Grid from hand at the moment. If I'm Lee, I'm probably bouncing the Goblin Engineer. That one seems like it could be the scariest.
He pluses the Teferi. We'll see if Carpenter wants to use that Engineer end step. Or perhaps the Psi.
Now, one interesting thing to note from McLeod's side, he actually has enough mana here to pop the Inventor's Fair on Carpenter's end step. That'll allow him to find the Thopter Foundry, untap. He can cast it, sacrifice the Pithy Needle to the Psi Master Thopterus and draw a card, and then go infinite from there.
So Carpenter is going to use the Engineer to get back Mishra's Bobble. Target himself because he still has that uncracked Scalding Tarn. He found what he wanted. He'll draw off the Bobble. Wear Tear. And he'll draw for turn.
Wear Tear is okay here, but
yeah, what are you even wearing meaningfully here? You know, the Thopter Foundry's not on the table, and if it's McLeod's turn, the Teferi protects it.
Yeah, this is not a good spot for Carpenter. Can just start casting stuff like Astrolabe to cycle and looking for some way to win here, but I think that if he passes the turn without doing anything overly meaningful, the game's over.
Well, here's Arkham's Astrolabe, makes a Thopter token off the Psi. He'll draw a card. Looks like another land for Carpenter. And yeah, he's just got to pack it in. Doesn't really have any meaningful material. Sees what McLeod is up to, the Inventor's Fair. So the backup looks like Collins Mullen also won. So this is going to be a 3-match win for Huang, McLeod, and Mullen over Fear, Carpenter, and Jessup.
Yeah, just a very interesting